Indirect discrimination. Indirect discrimination happens when an unjustifiable provision, criterion, or practice, although applied to everyone, causes a particular disadvantage to people based on sex, race, age, or disability. A requirement to speak a particular language will cause a particular disadvantage to people from a country where that language is not generally spoken. A requirement to be clean-shaven may cause a particular disadvantage to those from an ethnic group, such as Sikhs, where facial hair has cultural or religious importance. Weekly staff meetings, always held at 4 p.m, may cause a particular disadvantage to women who have caring responsibility for young children. Working overtime at short notice may be problematic for someone with type 1 diabetes if they do not have insulin available. Organising an outdoor adventure team building session would be problematic for an employee who uses a wheelchair. For a provision, criterion, or practice to cause a particular disadvantage, there is no need for it to adversely affect all members of a group. Indirect discrimination will only be established where the provision, criterion, or practice in question does cause that disadvantage to the person making the claim. Sally runs a cleaning company, employing 10 part-time cleaners. They all happen to speak Hungarian with very little English. She wants to recruit a supervisor and specify in the job description that the successful applicant must speak Hungarian. This would not be direct discrimination because Sally does not care about the national origin or nationality of the job applicant, only that he or she has a particular skill, speaking Hungarian. This may, however, amount to indirect discrimination because the job requirement will, on average, be harder for people who are not of Hungarian origin to meet. In other words, people from a country other than Hungary are much less likely to speak Hungarian than Hungarians. For the requirement to be lawful, Sally will have to show that the requirement is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. It is likely that she will be able to do this on the basis that it is legitimate and proportionate to seek to recruit a supervisor who can communicate directly with the employees he or she is supervising. A provision, criterion, or practice does not have to amount to an absolute requirement in order to amount to indirect discrimination. A mere preference will be enough if it can be shown that this causes a particular disadvantage. The key difference between direct and indirect discrimination is that indirect discrimination will only be unlawful if the provision, criterion, or practice is unjustifiable, in that the employer cannot show that it is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. Justification is a two-part test. The first requirement is to show the business reason that underlies the provision, criterion, or practice. The second is to show that the provision, criterion, or practice is a proportionate means of achieving that aim. The tribunal will have to decide this issue by weighing up all the circumstances of the case. But the discrimination law specifies that the matters to be taken into account should include the nature and extent of the disadvantage caused, how feasible it would be to overcome or mitigate the effects of that disadvantage, and whether the disadvantage caused is disproportionate when placed alongside the employer's business aim. A marketing company advertises for a copywriting assistant and states that the successful applicant must have at least a grade A in GCSE English. Because the requirement is confined to a GCSE, it will cause a particular disadvantage to people from countries other than England, and also to individuals who took their exams prior to GCSEs. The employer's aim, recruiting someone with the right educational standard, is clearly legitimate, but the requirement is unlikely to be justified. This is because the same aim could be achieved in a less discriminatory way. The employer could simply ask for a grade A in GCSE English or other equivalent qualification.